Homage to our fundamental teacher, Buddha Shakyamuni. Homage to Manjushri, wisdom and courage. Homage to all lineage masters of great kindness. The Dharma, infinitely profound and subtle, is rarely encountered even in millions of eons. Now we are able to hear, study, and follow it. May we fully realize the Tathagata's true meaning. To liberate all sentient beings, please generate supreme and excellent bodhicitta. Today we continue with the sufferings of the three higher realms. Among the sufferings of the three higher realms, we'll first discuss human suffering. Human suffering has two aspects. First, the three fundamental sufferings, and second, the 8 branch sufferings. Let's first discuss the three fundamental sufferings. Generally speaking, all three realms of samsara experience these three fundamental sufferings. But here, it's clearly evident that human beings in the three realms of samsara experience these three fundamental sufferings very intensely. Therefore, we need to analyze this carefully. During this analysis, everyone should contemplate very carefully if we understand the sufferings of hell beings, hungry ghosts, and animals. Some we can roughly understand, but others are difficult to comprehend, like the sufferings of hell or certain sufferings of hungry ghosts. It's hard for us to experience them directly or remember them clearly. But human suffering, after all, we have taken human form. If you carefully observe yourself and your own life, you should understand that the sufferings spoken of by the great compassionate Buddha appear in our body and mind at every moment. So if you don't contemplate, that's another matter entirely. But if you reflect even a little, you will surely recognize what the Buddha taught in the relevant sutras, that all phenomena are impermanent and all experiences are suffering. You will completely understand this truth. Therefore, our regular contemplation is extremely important. This time, everyone is practicing the preliminary practices together. It's not just reading through the text. I think if you have some Buddhist knowledge and understand the terminology, there's no difficulty. Everyone can read through it. But truly contemplating and practicing is much more difficult. Practice isn't so easy. For example, when we study and contemplate, reading 1 or 2 books isn't very difficult, but truly familiarizing ourselves with the content repeatedly in our mind stream. So that after this familiarization, the meaning naturally arises in our mind, and then applying it to our actual daily life. Such a state is quite difficult for us to achieve, so learning the Dharma is easy, but practicing is difficult. This is the reason the great masters repeatedly emphasize this. Therefore, we must repeatedly contemplate human suffering. Regarding human suffering, I think every principle described below should be quite easy to recognize in our daily lives. The Buddha also taught in the Lotus Sutra, we suffer various torments in the cycle of birth and death due to the three sufferings. This means that we sentient beings are tormented by the three great sufferings of suffering upon suffering, suffering of change, and suffering of conditioning. In the three realms of samsara, we experience boundless suffering. How can we eliminate such suffering? The only method to eliminate this suffering is the nectar of the Dharma. Of course, many people in the world today want to eliminate suffering. Some take medicine, some seek money, some seek emotional relationships, some seek status. Through various means, they try to avoid suffering and obtain happiness. This is humanity's common pursuit and shared goal. But what can truly be obtained is only the spirit of Buddhism. If it integrates with our mind, then it can eliminate our suffering. Just like a seriously ill patient, without relying on medical treatment, chronic illness is hard to cure. Therefore, we always wish for the teachings of the Dharma to reach everyone's heart. For every person, if they have faith, wisdom, and virtuous karmic connections, then it's impossible not to encounter the Dharma. The Buddha also said in the Infinite Life Sutra, with the medicine of all dharmas, cure the three sufferings. With the wondrous medicine of the Dharma, with the medicine of all dharmas, cure the three sufferings. It can stop the three great sufferings described below. So all Dharma friends here must understand this principle. We often say how suffering sentient beings are, how suffering people are. Indeed they are. Sometimes if you don't observe carefully, you might not notice. But if you observe our current life carefully, countless sufferings will certainly keep arising every moment. These sufferings naturally destroy all our happiness, comfort, and joy. Everything will be destroyed in an instant. So I often think, who are the truly happiest people in this world? Not necessarily the wealthy, not necessarily those with particularly high status. True happiness comes when the Dharma integrates with one's mind, achieving freedom and letting go. Such people, everything they do is in a state of happiness. This isn't boastful talk. History since ancient times can prove this. Many practitioners' experiences through cultivation can also verify this point. Therefore, the Dharma in our current era is an indispensable panacea for eliminating the intense suffering in people's hearts. So all Dharma friends here who have generated great vehicle bodhicitta cannot simply enjoy the flavor of the Dharma by yourselves while completely ignoring those around you. I think such an approach is unreasonable. Once you have certain ability, wisdom, and compassion, you shouldn't selfishly hoard it, but should share it with sentient beings who have the karmic connection. Of course, this may require a process if you yourself are not yet even slightly mature. Going to the cities would probably present certain difficulties because the habitual patterns and pollution outside are too severe now. Originally, you intended to liberate others, but you couldn't liberate them. Instead, you yourself got swept away by society's waves. In the end, you're powerless to extricate yourself. This is very possible. So during the process of practice, everyone should think of sentient beings while also considering self-protection. What we're discussing today is human suffering. Human suffering has three aspects. The three major sufferings are suffering of change, suffering upon suffering, and suffering of conditioning. What we'll discuss below is the suffering of change. The momentary happiness that people currently possess is constantly changing. We can say it turns into suffering in the blink of an eye. Your body is very healthy without any illness, but suddenly you catch a cold. Then you have a runny nose and feel miserable, completely lacking freedom. This is also a kind of suffering of change, constantly changing. For example, after eating food that was originally beneficial to the body, just when you're feeling satisfied and happy unexpectedly, parasites grow in your stomach. Suddenly you contract a serious wasting disease and suffer unbearably. Some of us should have quite good health, but due to dietary issues or other reasons, suddenly develop serious wasting disease. Wasting disease is a particular illness that probably also exists in Han Chinese regions. Many Dharma friends here who study medicine should understand it clearly. When I was about 10 years old before going to school, I once had this disease. While herding cattle on the mountain, I almost left this world later. Several shepherd boys nearby discovered me, and I finally recovered. It was extremely uncomfortable. How is this described in Western medicine? This is also something sudden. In any case, what we're discussing now is the suffering of change, which some sutras also call the suffering of destruction. Originally, it was a very happy life. In the Sutra of the Golden Youth's Causes and Conditions, there was a person called Wonderful Ear, whose child, after being born, brought tremendous misfortune to the entire household. Their house caught fire and ugly features appeared on his body. Originally, they were a very happy family with wealth and power, but later, due to sudden, momentary changes, they ended up living an extremely pitiful life like beggars. In daily life, we indeed often discover such things. The day before yesterday, I met a poor person. She said their house caught fire and her husband was also sent to prison. Later, she wandered everywhere with one child for many years. So this child now has no way to attend school. Yesterday, she asked if I could place him in school, and I agreed. So when I think of some family's situations and each person's circumstances, when they are young or wealthy, all their wealth and talents can change in an instant. So after we study the Dharma now, we completely understand that such phenomena occur in the world. Whether it's ourselves or others, on anyone's body, the phenomenon of suffering of destruction can appear. In the Prajnaparamita Heart Sutra commentary, it states, all worldly pleasures inevitably end in destruction. When conditions combine, they bring worry. All are called suffering of destruction. When describing the suffering of destruction, it says all worldly happiness ultimately returns to a state of suffering. We can see the world's most famous or wealthy people ultimately leave this world in very pitiful and tragic ways. This is a rule that no one can escape. So many people here now have healthy bodies and harmonious families without any problems or feel quite good about their practice in various aspects. But after all, we are reborn in this contaminated samsara. We will surely have a day when this physical body will be destroyed. In some practice songs it says beauty is like summer flowers, wealth like autumn clouds. On the surface they appear especially gorgeous and colorful, but in reality they cannot withstand the battering of wind and rain. In a very short time they are destroyed without a trace. This is a true law. So for us who generally study Mahayana Buddhism, we can completely understand the various setbacks, torments, and changes in life. So practitioners can endure some suffering, while those who haven't practiced feel the world is unfair to them or society is unfair to them, with many complaints against heaven and earth. So we must understand that ultimately everything in the world is suffering. For example, just when you're happy and joyful, suddenly enemies drive away your livestock, fire burns down your house, illness strikes your body, or you hear others' malicious slander, etc. In a moment you go from extreme joy to great sorrow. In an instant, all kinds of suffering come in waves beyond what you could ever imagine. Originally, the May 12th earthquake of 2008, May 12th at 2:27 p.m. At that time, all people throughout the Wenchuan area were living happy, fulfilling lives without any suffering. Very normally, suddenly, in an instant, heaven and earth changed completely. We can say earth-shaking changes occurred by 2:28, continuing until 2:30. In nearly 3 to 5 minutes, countless people left this world. Entire valleys and cities turned into ruins filled with wailing. So human life is truly extremely fragile, with nothing reliable. Our physical bodies, including all our feelings here, momentary or extremely subtle pleasant feelings, are nothing reliable. We cannot regard them as something permanent or everlasting. We absolutely must not think this way. If we think this way, it's completely a mistaken view, absolutely unreasonable. This is very easily changed from this point in this cycle of birth and death. The happiness, fortune, and reputation we seemingly possess actually have not the slightest permanence or stability, and ultimately cannot escape suffering. Some songs say, happiness is like a single hair, extremely fine. When it will break, no one can determine, therefore in birth and death. Suffering is the majority, happiness the extreme minority. Therefore the Buddha said in the Sutra of the Right Mindfulness of Dharma, in birth and death there are many faults and problems. Nothing is solid or permanent, all changes and is destroyed. These are the diamond words from the Buddha's sutras. In this cycle of birth and death suffering, faults, inauspicious or unfavorable things are numerous beyond count. Happiness, fortune, or pleasant physical and mental phenomena are extremely few, and even if these exist in a very short time, they become the nature of suffering. So sometimes, when looking at this society, indeed, many sufferings come naturally. You feel particularly wealthy, but in an instant it becomes another kind of suffering. After last year's financial crisis occurred, from a worldly perspective, many Eastern and Western tycoons and small business owners were all in a state of extremely painful feelings. I remember a German tycoon named Merkel, who originally had about $9.2 billion in family assets. In 2008, he ranked 94th among the world's wealthy, but later, after this crisis erupted, all his family assets fell into extremely serious difficulties. Finally, unable to accept it, he deliberately crashed his car and died. It became explosive world news. Later, Ireland's rocker, who was also very famous with family assets of about 500 million euros, later failed in his investments. Unable to face life anymore, he finally committed suicide with a gun. Ireland's third largest bank also collapsed. For a period last year throughout the world, people who were previously very happy, wealthy, and powerful, in just a few short months became completely different people. Those who haven't studied Buddhism and don't know about samsara feel as if they're living in days when heaven and earth are dark. But those with even a little realization, especially practitioners, we as practitioners now should contemplate these principles well every day. I hope we don't just casually speak these principles aloud, give an example or make an analogy. The examples and cases we give should help many people truly understand the real suffering of human existence. If from the depths of our hearts, from within our minds, we believe that indeed everything in the world cannot escape suffering, that there is no permanent happiness at this time, we won't have the slightest attachment to the human world. True renunciation and fear of samsara will naturally arise. Then it means our practice should be successful. Otherwise, if we don't understand the truth of the three realms and human existence at all, then superficially speaking, many profound and mysterious terms to protect, comfort, and praise ourselves probably won't be of much use. So true practice is what benefits the mind. Therefore, we must develop disgust for samsara. truly regards samsara like a person with liver disease looking at greasy food. Upon seeing this samsara, we find it extremely frightening. We don't want to stay here even for a moment. Like a prisoner who doesn't want to stay in a particularly dark prison. He very much wants to leave early. So if each of us develops a kind of fear of samsara from our hearts, then our practice will be perfected. In the 400 stanzas on the middle way, it also says, "This great ocean of suffering has no shore. How can the foolish beings drowning in it not be afraid?" This means that samsara is indeed a boundless great ocean. The ocean of suffering has no shore, but many ordinary beings without the wisdom of discernment always mistake suffering for happiness, impure filth for delicious food. They constantly sink in samsara, unable to extract themselves. Why? They cannot see the entire truth. Sometimes we can indeed say this, not speaking boastfully. Many people around us have actions that are completely meaningless. In your brief human life, you seek some wealth and fame. But what does this bring you? How much do you pay for it? When you think about it, you can indeed understand many profound meanings, but many people think completely differently from us. We point out a very bright, beneficial, and joyful golden path to them, but they instead regard us as mentally disturbed or are completely puzzled by our actions. They respond with such attitudes, so in the end, we're of no help. So I think for people here, I sincerely hope that through contemplating the suffering of samsara, you truly reflect. After contemplating, it's not just speaking about it. You develop understanding of samsara in your mind and continuously familiarize yourself with it. Finally, many Buddhist realizations, including tantric states, can naturally manifest in your mind. Otherwise, without going through these stages and steps, except for extremely rare individuals with special sudden realization, generally awakening, and insight are not easy to achieve. Next, we discuss the second suffering, suffering upon suffering. So-called suffering upon suffering means before the previous suffering has completely disappeared, another blow follows right behind. We can say one wave has not settled, another wave arises. In our world, we often experience one suffering not yet completely gone, and another suffering follows immediately. Worldly people often think this is very unlucky and unfortunate. For example, leprosy hasn't healed yet. Then you develop a malignant tumor. Tumor is a disease. The tumor hasn't improved yet, then sores appear on the body. Father unfortunately passes away, then mother also departs, robbed completely by enemies, then your beloved dies. Many people truly experience one suffering not yet completely gone, then another suffering, plus yet another suffering. I once heard news from the Northeast. A family was sending their child to school when a van struck and killed the student. Then his father tried to save him and was flagging down cars on the road. While flagging cars, a sedan also hit and injured him. When his wife discovered this, she simply couldn't accept it and finally had a mental breakdown. After hearing this news, an elderly mother in the family finally had a stroke and was hospitalized. People say their families are very troubled. In fact, many of us, whether practitioners or not, experience much suffering when karmic forces from past or present lives ripen. We have read about this before in the Sutra of the Wise and the Foolish. The brief experience of Bhikkhuni Marvel when she was a householder illustrates this clearly. Many sufferings can indeed befall one person repeatedly. At that time, she and her husband took their child to visit her parents. At night, they couldn't continue their journey. When dawn broke, they discovered her husband had been bitten by a poisonous snake and died. My storytelling might not be very... many of you tell stories much more clearly. If I get the details wrong, please forgive me. Some of our Dharma friends here are really excellent storytellers. After her husband died, she was extremely grief-stricken. She kept holding her husband's hand until she fainted. Later, her child's crying woke her up again. When she awoke, dawn had broken, and there was nothing else she could do. She had no choice but to leave her husband's body there and take her 2 children to cross a river. She couldn't manage both children by herself. She left the older child on the bank and first took the younger one across. Just as she reached the other bank with the younger child, the older child she had left behind started calling mother while wading into the water toward her. As he tried to cross, she watched helplessly as he was swept away. When she turned back to rescue the older child, he had already been carried away by the current. It was too late. She couldn't catch up. At that moment, the younger child was devoured by wolves. When she returned, all she found were bloodstains. Nothing else remained. She was in tremendous agony, weeping there, when a Brahmin from her hometown appeared. When she asked about her parents, he told her their house had caught fire and her parents and family had all perished. So in this brief span of time, many sufferings can indeed befall one person. Sometimes, for instance, I catch a cold today, then someone speaks ill of me, and I lose something very precious to me. Then on the road things go badly and I crash into something else. I might think I'm experiencing exceptional suffering, but actually it's nothing special. This is just how samsara is. If we have this understanding in our hearts, we might face suffering more easily. The definition of suffering upon suffering, Master Huyuan of the Sui dynasty wrote in his commentary on the Vimalakirti Sutra, suffering arising from suffering is called suffering upon suffering. Suffering added to suffering is called suffering upon suffering. I find those verses quite good. They're all about suffering, suffering, suffering. What is suffering upon suffering? Suffering arising within suffering, or suffering added to suffering. We often say misfortunes never come singly. This is indeed very common. Blessings don't come in pairs. Misfortunes never come alone. Generally speaking, wealth and prosperity cannot appear frequently. When one type of suffering occurs, it triggers many karmic forces. And when these conditions converge, various sufferings begin to manifest. Therefore, I think when we are in this human world, we must understand these sufferings not merely intellectually, but when you meditate, truly recognizing these sufferings is actually quite accessible. Throughout all of samsara, wherever we're born, we only pass our time through suffering upon suffering. We don't even have a moment's chance for peaceful, joyful stability. Within one suffering, another suffering appears. Before that suffering has disappeared, yet another suffering begins to torment you. At such times, we should pray to our Guru and the three jewels and take upon ourselves the sufferings of all beings, just as taught in the 7 points of training the mind. Today, I have this suffering, that suffering. Let all these various sufferings be placed upon me. Through the power and merit of my experiencing suffering, may the sufferings of all connected beings be eliminated. This is the best way to face suffering or to use suffering as the path. Now let's discuss the third type, the suffering of conditioning. Those of us who consider ourselves happy appear on the surface not to be suffering personally, but in reality, we haven't escaped the causes of suffering at all. Many people today aren't sick, and it's not snowing heavily. On the surface, they're doing fine and feel today is pretty good, but actually, we haven't examined our lives in detail. If we examine our lives carefully, suffering never leaves us. For example, eating, dressing, housing, possessions, decorating, hosting feasts, and so on, all of these can become causes for creating negative karma. What we do is completely disguised evil. The consequence of all this is undoubtedly suffering. The way to explain the suffering of conditioning differs in various treatises like the Treasury of Abhidharma and the Precious Garland. But generally, the Mahayana explanation is that this is a type of change. Whatever changes is subject to transience and movement, and this is a cause of suffering. Why does the commentary on the introduction to the Middle Way say beings are like reflections of the moon on water? Because beings are like the moon on water, we generate compassion for them. Why is this said? Because beings are ever changing like the moon on water. They cannot possibly have happiness. There are many profound meanings here, including in the commentary on the 400 stanzas on the Middle Way and the root stanzas of the Middle Way, which also elaborate on related content. So here, from the perspective of some Mahayana teachings, we cannot see the suffering of conditioning on the surface. I remember in Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the stages of the path, it's like when someone has a sore on their body. When untouched, there's actually no sensation, but as soon as it's touched, pain will appear. The suffering of conditioning is similar. It just hasn't manifested temporarily, but actually this suffering exists in a hidden way. Some scriptures say birth, aging, and death correspond to the 3 great sufferings. How does birth manifest? Through the suffering of conditioning. How does aging manifest? Through the suffering of change. How does death manifest? Through suffering upon suffering. We can also say that birth, aging, and death manifest in life through the 3 great sufferings. So in our practice, we should constantly observe. Why do we say samsara is suffering? The Buddha constantly taught in related scriptures that all of samsara is suffering. Some people tell us, how can you say all of samsara is suffering? We're actually very happy. Look, I have money and status. Right now, I don't have any suffering at all. But this is just for a day or two. After some time, will you always be like this?
No.
From childhood until now, have you always been like this?
Also no.
In life, if we really made a proper accounting of happiness and suffering, except for very few practitioners with realization, the component of happiness should be very small. Now let's use tea and Tisampa as examples to illustrate this principle, what we call the suffering of conditioning. Tea is a plant grown in Han Chinese regions. Patrul Rinpoche's point is that Tibet indeed didn't produce tea before, and doesn't produce it now either. Now it seems Luhuo produces a little tea called ose tea. In the process of planting and picking leaves, the number of beings killed is countless. Many Dharma friends here are from tea-producing regions. I have visited Yunnan and places that produce Longjing tea. I could feel that in the process of making tea and planting, countless beings are killed. Especially in summer, tea leaves are covered with countless insects. When modern pesticides are sprayed, all the insects die immediately. It's very easy. Generally speaking, when producing tea, a Korean person once told me, "Oh my, good tea cannot reach the market. It's impossible to buy. The tea you buy is all garbage tea. Don't drink tea anymore. The tea you drink isn't good. If you want to drink tea in the future, I'll provide it for you." That's what he said. Good tea isn't sold. Tea growers drink it themselves. As for the poor quality tea, what's actually only 1-year-old pu'er gets labeled as 1,000-year pu'er. The difference is enormous. Here, we're describing Tibetan tea. Actually, regarding Tibetan tea, when Atisha came to Tibet, many Tibetan devotees offered him tea. Atisha was very pleased and first offered it as a new offering to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. After drinking the tea, he said, "In our India, we simply cannot get tea like this. This tea has a very sweet taste and can be offered to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. After drinking it, one's health improves, wisdom increases, and great compassion arises." He spoke of many qualities of tea. So when we have time, let's learn from Atisha and drink tea properly. But behind it, Patrul Rinpoche explained the suffering that tea brings. Here it's explained like this. From Kangding downward, when transported by human labor, each person needs to carry a weight of 62 ka. This was an old unit of weight. Previously from Kangding through Mount Erlang to Yan, it was all walking paths. I heard that in the forests of Mount Erlang there were many bandits and fierce beasts. Generally, when merchants passed through, very few arrived safely. According to some histories, including those of Master Fazun and previous accounts of Gangkar Rinpoche, we can see the social conditions of that time. People carried large tea bricks on top of their heads. At that time, the ancients probably used methods similar to those in modern India and Nepal. When they carried large tea bricks on their heads, the skin on their foreheads was worn completely away, even to the point where white bone was clearly visible. Still, they continued transporting non-stop, all on foot, carried by people. When we went to Nepal, at the Nepalese border, I don't know about now, but when we went, it was 20 years ago, at that time, many people carried things on their heads for transport. At that time, I thought of this passage by Patrul Rinpoche. Probably at that time, these Tibetan people also transported tea from Kangding to Ya'an, Chengdu, and those tea-producing areas all the way up by carrying it on their heads. As a result, because people sought money and wealth, even when the white bone on their heads appeared, they still continued transporting like this. From Kangding upward, when transported by zhou, yak, mules, and other pack animals, all the livestock suffered from sores on their backs and bellies, loss of hair, rotting skin, and great pain. Many elderly people in the past often made such journeys, including elderly people from various places. From Serta to Kangding was originally about 440 kilometers. This entire distance relied completely on zhou, yak, or horses for transport. During the transport process, the roads in between were also very dangerous. At that time, indeed, 1 brick of tea was not easy to obtain. Behind it lay the contributions and suffering of countless beings. Compared to now, there seems to be some difference. Although transportation now has changed significantly, the karma people create in making tea or in the entire trading process has not decreased. It's just that an intermediate process has been simplified. Not only in the transportation process must humans and animals endure this unimaginable suffering of servitude, but also when marketing tea, both buyers and sellers engage in outrageous lies and shameless behavior, swearing oaths, breaking promises, and other deceptive means or loud arguments to make sales. Both parties buying and selling tea definitely lie and create karma through swearing. Various deceptive methods are difficult to avoid. Now, many lay practitioners in business feel that without lying, there's no way to do business. What can they do? Without doing business, there's no way to live. This is also a problem. This is the contradiction between Buddhist cause and effect and practical life. We can only answer, try your best to find ways to be more truthful. For other solutions, there may be no alternatives. The tea we drink, modern tea, is the same. Pu'er, Longjing tea, jasmine tea, and various other teas. Behind them, there is indeed much suffering. Therefore, on the surface, it seems like drinking a sip of tea is fragrant and comfortable. Today, I drink coffee. I drink tea all day, staying happy constantly. Actually, behind it there is still great suffering. Therefore, when we analyze in detail regarding objective issues, there are indeed many undiscovered karmic causes and effects within. This doesn't mean we should eat nothing, drink nothing, and just sit here. Patrul Rinpoche's meaning is that we should clearly recognize that behind what people now consider happiness, there are still countless factors and conditions of suffering. Once you know this, people will cherish many opportunities. These goods were basically exchanged for sheep's wool and lambskin, according to Tibetan custom of that time. Here, explaining the essence of the suffering of conditioning, if all compounded phenomena are changeable, then the suffering of conditioning is easily recognized. The commentary on the Heart Sutra also says, all compounded phenomena are subject to transient flow by nature. Pressuring and disturbing, they are all called the suffering of conditioning. This is such a teaching, so all the compounded phenomena we usually see are changeable by nature. We think drinking tea is wonderful, but actually within the nature of this tea lie hidden the sufferings of many beings. Who knows that food on the plate, every grain contains hardship? Looking at our food and the clothes we wear, behind these there is indeed much suffering. If you haven't been to factories and markets, you might think life is always brilliant, but after you go there, you'll feel... Now, many people seem not to contemplate this, which is why our practice is poor. For example, we live in a house. Think about the source of this house. The money we use now is indeed hard-earned money. It's not easy. From the heart, we feel a sense of indebtedness to beings. We wear a beautiful piece of clothing. Many people in big cities now change clothes daily, changing every day. The changing is nice. This is a kind of happiness. Every day you change. Today you wear white, tomorrow red, the day after black, then green, then floral patterns, then white on top, black on bottom, various combinations. You keep changing. But behind it all, you may never have thought about the source of the food we eat, every piece of firewood, every grain of rice. Actually, this is what we call practice. In the future, we should all develop the habit of contemplating in this way. Good practitioners will think about this. All of one's thoughts and actions, and all the people and things involved, should be observed. One should have the ability to observe. But we're like mentally ill people, only caring about ourselves. Beyond this, regarding present, future, and past matters, we have no analytical or observational ability. This is our shortcoming. Here, it also mentions that those teas, according to Tibetan custom of that time, were probably exchanged for silver, and especially, since Patrul Rinpoche was in the Sershul area where sheep were abundant, he probably described their living conditions at that time. Much was exchanged for lambskin and sheep's wool. Below we'll discuss how sheep's wool and lambskin are also not easily obtained. This sheep's wool is the same. In summer, on each sheep's body, lice, blood-sucking insects, and other beings are equal in number to the amount of wool, when people use scissors to shear wool. Most of these beings have their heads severed, their backs broken, organs spilling out, and die. Those that remain are tangled up with the wool and placed in clean areas where they suffocate, unable to breathe. In the end, they have no choice but death. Most die this way. Lambskin is no exception. Young lambs have just been born with all their faculties complete and possess feelings of pain and pleasure. Their bodies are developing and growing. Just as they begin to experience the joy of living, they are immediately slaughtered. Their owner, wanting the skin, kills them just as they're able to stand. Although they are ignorant animals, they likewise yearn for life, fear death, and are terrified of the pain of breath separation. The mother of the slaughtered lamb, like a loving mother who has lost her only child, is grief-stricken to the point of despair. These are all facts we witness firsthand in real life. If we just think a little about such commercial transactions, we can clearly recognize that merely drinking a sip of tea has already become a cause for the lower realms. Drinking a sip of tea is not easy. Probably most tea nowadays is not exchanged for lambskin and sheep's wool. We exchange money for it. What is the source of this money? Everyone can contemplate this from various angles. When contemplating, you should be able to feel it. Let's stop here for today. Thank you.
sonunda yitamse rubani atone de jana basi jirgana jirano chupai chupun sonen roa
Bandara Bana Savarda Bandara Bana Sada Bandara Bana Savarda